Our next speaker will be speaking on the topic FREGH Emerging Leaders. She is a passionate advocate for faith, justice, ecumenism, and the empowerment of young people. She is deeply convinced that every individual is uniquely created and valued by God, a belief that shapes both her work and her witness. By profession, she is a child protection solicitor, and she also serves as a youth pastor, dedicating her time to supporting and guiding the next generation. She is also the Yaya Regional Coordinator for RCCG UK Region 3. Please welcome with us Pastor Dolly Bamigbade.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's lovely to be with you today. I want to first of all thank our pastor, our regional pastor, Pastor Kola Bamigbade, and every other person in the leadership, all our pastors. Thank you so much for this privilege to talk about the role of FREGH emerging leaders in church growth. And also thank you guys that are joining on this call because you want to learn more about church growth and the role, which is my section, the role of FREGH emerging leaders. Okay, let's start. Let me be very honest with you. You know, when I was given this title and given this role to do this presentation, I was really speaking to God and struggling that, Lord Almighty, there are far more better and more qualified people to talk about this section. And the Lord reminded me of a few things, and this is the few things that I'm going to talk about. You know, over the years, I've been privileged to witness and be part of growth within youth and young adult ministries and movements. At the same time, I've also witnessed and experienced, seasons of stagnation, seasons of decline, and those seasons of famine when you're waiting and you're praying for the promised rain, you're waiting and you're praying for increase, yet you cannot see any sign of it. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the things that I have learned, and it's important in understanding about church growth as we go to our next slide, is that we are talking about church growth with eternity in view. It was great to hear about our Vision 2032. It was great to hear all of these things. But sometimes you can get lost in the numbers without having that understanding that we're talking about church growth with eternity in view. In fact, Pastor Kola, he spoke about it in his introduction, that, it's not just about numbers. It's not about growth in numbers, but we're also talking about kingdom growth. What are we saying? We're talking about the fact that when we're looking at success, souls equal success. Souls equal success. Not just people sitting down on the pews, but people being saved. People who we can say that, yes, if the trumpet it blows, if we know that today, God comes back, these people are going to make it into heaven. Our desire is for those who are already within our churches, as well as those who are coming in, to develop a genuine and authentic relationship with Jesus. Church growth is kingdom growth with eternity in view. I want to speak about some verses that confirm the things that I'm saying about church growth is with eternity in view. If we go to the next slide, Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15, we're told the parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the lost coin, and the parable of the lost son or the prodigal son, as we see in the New King James Version. And when you look at certain verses, this is Jesus, this is God's heart about what we're talking about, church growth. In Luke chapter 15, verse 7, when we look at this parable of the lost sheep, it says, in the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and turns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. There is so much more joy in heaven. One sinner coming back to God, repenting. We see it in the parable of the lost coin in Luke chapter 15, verse 10. It says that in the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angel when even one sinner repents. Luke 15, verse 32, as we look at church growth with eternity in view, we have to celebrate this happy day This was the father speaking to the son that had remained. But your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found. As we talk about church growth, as we want to see an increase in number in our churches, the heart behind this vision, the true essence of this vision is to see the kingdom of God gain that sinner to come back to God. The kingdom of God gain another lost soul. That is the essence of what we're talking about with church growth. So let's move on. The role of the FREGH emerging leaders in church growth. The role of the FREGH emerging leaders in church growth. What is FREGH? What is FREGH? FREGH is a strategic initiative by the RCCG Continent 9 that aims to catalyze spiritual and social change. The tag that we have is it's a strategy to move forward and faster. It's a strategy to move forward and faster in God's kingdom agenda. We have the F, we have the R, we have the E, we have the G, we have the H. But what I am focusing on, the strand that I'm focusing on is emerging leaders, the E strand. The E strand is a strategic initiative to prepare youth and young adults for servant leadership in the church and society. The vision of the strand of emerging leaders is to prepare every youth and every young adult for servant leadership in the church and society. I thought it would be useful to take a pause here and to touch upon the term youth and young adults, because I know that the word youth is used interchangeably, and I think it's because of different cultural contexts. So the term youth, as it can often be used interchangeably, focuses on two main groups when we're talking about the youth and young adults here. We're talking about youth, and you can say teens, who are from the age of 13 to 17. For some people in your churches, it might be just the secondary school age, up to sixth form, up to college, which is 11 to 17, or 11 to 17/18. That is the youth, or what you can classify as the teenagers strand of this vision. The other part is the young adults, or sometimes because of our different cultural contexts, you might use the word youth, which are those who are 18. And if you want to look at an end mark, you will say 18 to 35. So when we're talking again in this section of what I am speaking on, I'm talking about the teenagers, the youths who are between the ages of 11, 13 to 17. And then we're looking at the young adults who are from the ages of 18 to 35. Look at some of the key words in our vision. We're talking about preparing, making our youth and our young adults ready beforehand for a purpose, for a use, or for an activity. We're talking about, our young people, learning about servant leadership, learning that, being a leader, as the Bible tells us, is not about being lord over someone, but no, as Matthew 20, verse 25 to 28 tells us, that it's about humility, it's about service. Pastor Toby told us something yesterday, and he was talking about this thing called, active participation, and how we are preparing our youth and our young adults for the next stage is that they're actually doing it right now. In whatever roles that they find themselves within the church, we're already preparing them for leadership by them being part of leadership. Let's move on to the next slide. So let's talk about the mission of FREGH. On a continental level, the three missions of this strand of emerging leaders is, number one, listening to young people about new models of church. So I am reading exactly what the mission is for emerging leaders, is listening to young people about new models of church. Number two, it's to design and deliver initiatives for youth leadership development. Number three is to mentor and disciple young people into their God-given calling. So this is on a continental level, and we're praying and we're hoping that this is what is adopted all the way down to our local parishes, that we're listening to young people about new models of church. We're designing and delivering initiatives for youth leadership development within our churches, and not only just within our churches, but how they can do that in their workspaces, in their spheres of influence, and also to mentor and disciple young people into their God-given vision. You know, the verse that surrounds this whole emerging leaders strand is 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. It's the governing verse for emerging leaders. It's when Apostle Paul, so we bring this into context, Apostle Paul, he was writing to Timothy, who he had left to be in charge of the church in Ephesus. And it is clear here in what he says that don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. It's clear here that Paul could identify, or maybe Timothy was already struggling with this, is that, you know, that some people may disqualify Timothy because of his age. Maybe Timothy himself, you know, would disqualify himself because of his age. And this is clear that Paul is saying age should not be a disqualifying factor. Age should not be a disqualifying factor, you know, in church growth. Age should not be a disqualifying factor in being a leader in the church. So let's go on now to just 3 things I wanted to talk about in terms of the role of FREGH in emerging leaders in church growth. So I'm mindful that I'm speaking to a mixed audience today. You know, I'm speaking to pastors, ministers, those leading churches or ministries, and workers and individuals, both young and old. So I'm going to try and address everyone in the next 3 points. You know, for many of us, it's what I'm going to speak about are reminders. You know this already. For some, it might just be, you know, a new thing that you've just discovered today. So I want you to ask yourselves these things as I go through the next 3 points. God, how do you want me to implement this in my context? And if you identify a barrier, ask God, what next? How can I deal with this? So the first one is strategies and ideas. So the role of emerging leaders, this strand of youth and young adults in church growth, the first thing is strategies and ideas. Young people, regardless of how many they are in your church, have ideas and contributions that are valuable to the vision of church growth in your house. I'll say that again. Young people, regardless of how many that you have in your church, have ideas and contributions that are valuable to the vision of church growth for the house that you are in right now. If you're young, you know, and have embraced the vision of the house, you know, those people that have embraced it, it may surprise some of you because you might get there and you'll just be like, oh, they just don't engage, they just don't do anything. But you know, a lot of them are already asking the same questions that you're asking about church growth. They're asking questions like, why don't we have more members? Why am I in a church that doesn't have more members than it has right now? Why don't we have more young people? Oh, what can I do? Oh, we should really do this, but how can I say this? How can I approach, you know, leadership or even ministry leaders or someone else about, oh, this might be a better way? In fact, if you find out and just, you know, go and speak to one of them and speak to someone, you find out that maybe they're already in conversations. Maybe they have their own group chats. They're praying in their homes about it. You know, they're having their own little space where they're trying to figure out, Lord, what can we do about church growth? But those who, I said this, those who have embraced the vision of this house, of your house, your churches, those who have embraced the vision, they're already asking these questions. They're already having these ideas. Now, the question is there a platform? Is there a space for these ideas to be heard? And what happens if they are shared? The question is, again, is there a platform or space for these ideas to be heard? And what happens when these ideas are shared. You know, one of the things that I wanted to say is that, you know, we have ideas about church growth and how young people can jump in and how they can run with this vision. But one of the great things and good things that would be good for us to do, or we should be doing, is as soon as we have this idea, let's sit down the young people, let's have that discussion with them so that there is buy-in, so that they also can speak about the strategies and ideas that they have to contribute to the house. You know, let young people sit at the table. In fact, the truth is, young people, they are stakeholders of church growth because, as we talk about the ages that we talked about, 11 to 35, they're already part of the vision. They're already part of the generation that is working and already taking responsibility in leadership. And for those who may be younger, they're going to get there. You know, they're going to get there. So they have a stake in the vision for the house because they are the ones who are actively in it right now, or they're going to be handed over the baton for the house. You know, a common caution, and I'm speaking to the leaders and, you know, maybe those in leadership in their ministries, you know, a common caution that people have is that, oh, but what if, you know, the ideas that they have is not godly, the ideas that they have is not the right thing, you know, and then you get this reference to King Rehoboam in 1 Kings chapter 12, where he rejects the counsel of the elders, of the wise, and he goes to his colleagues and his peers, and they advise him in the wrong thing. And the text, you know, it suggests that, oh, that's why you need to listen to the wisdom of the elders. And yes, we do need to listen to the wisdom of the elders. I'm not saying let's disregard the wisdom of the elders. I'm just talking about how there needs to be, because young people are stakeholders in this vision and in this church. They too, the Lord has given them God-given strategies and ideas. But one of the things I wanted to say, as I said that with King Rehoboam, is when you read 1 Kings chapter 12, one of the things that I see, the text does not suggest that he ever sought God's wisdom in the process. The text actually, it talks about how he rejected the right counsel from the wisdom of the elders, and he took the wrong counsel from the young people. But in that text, when we read it, there's never any kind of indication that he sought God's wisdom in the process. In the same way, in contrast, you look at Moses. Moses, when he has his father-in-law, Jethro, you know, he comes to him and he speaks to him and advises him about the burden of leadership and what he should do. Jethro says something to Moses, and he says, if God approves the plan, again, when you look at, you know, Moses, when the daughters of Zelophehad, they come to him, you know, and say, you need to change the inheritance laws. In Numbers chapter 27, verse 1 to 11, Moses goes to God. He brings the matter before the Lord, and God affirms their request. So when I'm talking about listening to the ideas and the strategies of young people in your church, I'm not saying just accept it, but take it to God. And if God approves it, yes, run with it. But also walk hand in hand with the young people as you pray to God and God says, okay, no, this is not right. Speak to the young people. Bring that, you know, family meeting, that community hall gathering, and speak about the strategies and ideas and say, look, we've considered this. We have prayed about it, but we do not feel that God is leading us in this way. How about this way? Because this is what God is saying, so that there is buy-in into the vision. To the youth and young adults on this platform, I want to say something on this part about strategies and ideas, that there is also a need for boldness in sharing the God-given ideas that you feel that you are carrying. There is also a need for boldness in sharing the God-given ideas that you feel that you are carrying. The first thing is, have you prayed about it? Have you tested whether the idea is from God or it's just comparison that you're seeing in another church or outside? If you've done that, if you've prayed about it and you've tested it and God is telling you, then go ahead, boldly share it. So number one, the way that young people can feed into the vision of church growth is with strategies and ideas. Number two, connection. So, to the leaders, another role that young people can play, and as I said, leaders, even workers in church growth, is connection. In John chapter 4, okay, Jesus encounters this Samaritan woman at the well. After she encounters him, the Bible tells us in John 4, 28 to 30, that she goes back to her village and says, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did." As a result, the Bible tells us many people follow her, and come to meet Jesus. You see here, as we're talking about connection, she returned to her own community with a testimony that created a connection, from these people to come and hear and come and see this person that she had just encountered. And it aroused curiosity in them. In the same way, many of our young people, as we're saying, what is the role of young people in church growth? Is connection. Many of our young people already have access to other young people in schools, in colleges, in sixth forms, in universities, in workplaces, in multicultural communities. They're positioned in places the church may not naturally reach. They're positioned in places that the church may not always naturally reach. However, in some conversations that I've had with many young people, especially within the RCCG network, there can be hesitation in making this connection effective or making these connections actually happen because of many reasons. But I'm going to say two things that I have realized and I've noticed. The first one is that, first of all, there isn't a genuine personal connection with Jesus themselves. There isn't a genuine personal connection with Jesus themselves. Young people who truly know the gospel, understand the need for salvation, and are living from the conviction, want to connect their community with what they know. They want to let them know about this Jesus that saved their souls. They want to make that connection. But many a times, and I'm not saying this through judgment, many have, I say many, some have come to me and said, "Listen, Dolly, the truth is I know we're always talking about evangelism and all of this. We're talking about, but me, myself, I'm not even sure whether I believe in what I believe." And so, as we talk about church growth, there is that foundational level that we need to start off with, is ensuring that even our young people are plugged in and connected to the source. Once they're plugged in, they're connected to the source, they understand the need of salvation, they understand the ministry of reconciliation, they will, without being begged, run with it. Another thing I wanted to say, because some people will say, "Well, that's the role of the youth pastor. That's the role of, the pastor of the house, the leadership, the church." But I want to encourage you that it is all our roles to encourage our young people to have a personal connection with Jesus. What I read, in John chapter 4, the Samaritan woman's encounter with Jesus was not actually taking place in the temple setting. It took place at the well. It took place at the well. It wasn't in the temple setting. So it may be that kind of having that kind of aspect of you having to call a young person, speaking to them, inviting them out, getting to know them, and seeing and walking with them in their journey of faith. Number two, another reason why there isn't that connection is that because the young people, they don't have a connection to the vision of the house. And they don't see that the house has a heart for discipling and raising the next generation. When I was younger, and thank God I don't do this anymore, but when I was younger, I was evangelizing. Quite a few of my friends, we were evangelizing. But unfortunately, as we shared Jesus, we weren't telling the people we were sharing Jesus to come to our house. We were signposting them to other houses that we thought that they would grow. Now, looking back, I realized that at the time, it was because, we ourselves did not understand the vision of the house that we were in. And we ourselves did not see that the house itself, I'm not saying that house didn't have it. I'm just saying we ourselves didn't see that the house had the heart for discipling and raising the next generation. It may be the case that you have some young people who are sharing their faith, but they're not always making a clear connection back to their local church community. And so we need to start asking ourselves, why does this disconnect exist? What is shaping this disconnect? Have honest conversations. Have these honest conversations. You know, are we actually fostering an environment that demonstrates commitment to discipling and raising the next generation? And for the youth and the young adults, so now speaking to our youth and our young adults on this platform, the question I will now pose that I had to ask myself a long time ago is, what is hindering me from making these connections, you know, that support the vision of church growth in my church? What is hindering me from doing this? And if I know what it is, then let me go straight to those who have got this vision of church growth and have been speaking about church growth and want me to be a part of it, and tell them so that we can discuss and see where we can have solutions. And sometimes it might just be our mindset. And once we actually hear from our leaders, you know, our mindset begin to change. And another thing is, if we are preparing and praying, if we are praying for harvest as youth and young adults, how are we preparing ourselves to receive the harvest that's coming in? How are we preparing ourselves to receive the harvest that's coming in? I really, really want to implore our youth and young adults that are here that please do not give up. Please do not give up. Please ensure, especially that we know that, number one, you believe God and you believe in this ministry of reconciliation, that there is a vision of the house, there's a vision of this organization, RCCG, to win souls with eternity in view. And please don't give up and say, I'm not going to be part of this vision. But please use the connections, the places that God has placed you in, to bring more souls into the kingdom. And the third point, the role of emerging leaders, so I'm talking about youth and young adults in church growth, is action, is action. You know, finally, young people are the heart of the physical aspect of church growth, the physical aspect, which I mean running with a vision, as missional disciples. Missional disciples. When a young person truly embraces the vision, they become the key carriers of it. They translate this vision into action, and they help the strength in youth, you know, to drive it forward with energy, with commitment, and with momentum. You see this imagery when you look at Exodus chapter 17. You see the young people. I can liken the young people as the Joshua and the fighting men on the battlefield. Whilst we have the Moses, don't get me wrong, there's still other fighting men that are beyond the ages that I've talked about. But I'm talking about, in this aspect, young people who are the Joshua and the fighting men. Whilst we have the Moseses, the Aarons, the Hur, who are on the mountain playing their part. Each has a distinctive role, but a vital role in seeing God's vision or God's purposes accomplished when we talk about church growth. So the question is, what ways can we get our young people to see that they are missional disciples? What ways can we get our young people to see that they're missional disciples? So having this shift in mindset where they stop focusing, and it's, again, as I talk about young people, it's the same for us as well, whether or not we're young or old, where our primary focus is not self any longer, but our faith is a more outward faith, a missional posture that says, Lord, here I am, send me. So it's not a self-focused approach to faith, but more an outward approach to faith that, Lord, I am a missionary sent here, being born here in the United Kingdom, moved here to the United Kingdom, placed in this community to go out and spread the kingdom of God, to go out and spread the gospel, to all those who have never heard it, all those who have heard it but have rejected it, for all those who used to believe but no longer believe. How can we get our young people to turn their mindset to a missional posture? Young people who see everyday life as a place of mission, so they intentionally share and demonstrate the gospel and engage the world with Jesus's heart. A lot of it will be teaching. A lot of it will be equipping our young people. Some are very scared to share their faith, and they need some more equipping about this is how you share your faith. And I'm grateful for the different things that we have in our continent and the different, programs that we have in our regions as well about evangelism and discipling other people in the area of church growth. But how do we get our young people to plug in so that they themselves, can feel confident to go out and share the vision? Another thing, not just equipping, but is demonstrating. A lot of times, and this is not an excuse for youth or young adults, it's not an excuse at all for youth and young adults, but a lot of times, we're asking our youth and young adults to run with this vision, yet we ourselves are not running with the vision. We need to demonstrate, as Jesus demonstrated to his disciples, we ourselves need to demonstrate the action part of being a missional disciple. And we need to mentor and disciple our young people into their God-given callings. Remember, that was one of the FREGH visions. One of the vision of FREGH emerging leaders is mentoring and disciple young people into their God-given callings. Because when they get into their God-given callings, they will understand why they have been placed in that role. They will understand what part they are playing in that role for church growth. And the Lord will help us in Jesus' name. So to summarize in this aspect, the vision of FREGH emerging leaders strand and the fact that we have young people, it plays an important role in church growth. The vision that we have of FREGH emerging leaders and young people who are the people that this strand is targeted at, they play an important role in church growth. Once young people believe in God and they embrace the vision of the house, they can contribute with God-given strategies and ideas. They can build key connections back into their communities, asking people, come and see this man, this Jesus that I've met. And also they serve as a core action team in implementing the church growth vision. But please, there's one thing I miss about the action aspect of things. We need to allow our young people to be able to take action. I'm grateful. I've heard it on this call. I've heard it a lot that, we are given the opportunities for our young people to take action. But please let it be a real, genuine action where they're backed up, as Pastor Toby said yesterday, financially, where they're backed up as well with time, with space, that it's not just we're ticking a box, but actually we want you to do this work of church growth. We want you guys to be missional disciples. And so we're truly investing in this because we believe in it, because we recognize the wealth within the strand of emerging leaders. So we are understanding that it is important that we don't neglect this area. We don't neglect our young people. We don't look down on them saying that this person, they're not quite yet ready. We don't look down on them because they are young, but we continue to pour into them on every level, continue to pour into them on every level. And likewise, for every young person in here, these are the 3 things that we can get involved in our local parishes, with our strategies and ideas, with our connections, and with taking action. And so just a quick ending. It's just to let you know about Yaya Region 3's role in church growth. Yaya UK and Yaya Region 3's role in church growth. Many of you guys will be thinking that, Dolly, you've outlined a lot of principles, 3 principles here, but it still doesn't fully address what I'm observing in my own church. Well, of course, there's the role of prayer, which I'm going to talk about at the end. But there's also the support system that we have here, which is Yaya, which is the youth and young adults, and also the teens directorate as well, and why their role is important. You know, one of the main roles of Yaya, who I'm going to be focusing on, is that our vision is that we exist to serve young people across the United Kingdom. Our primary focus is to unite and support young people within RCCG UK, whilst also partnering with the wider work God is doing through Christian youth and young adult initiatives nationally to reach the unsaved. But we are here to walk alongside you. Within our vision, you know, our vision is to support young people, but also to support the leaders that have been put in place of the youth and the young adults, whether they're young leaders or whether they're the leaders that are just leading the young people themselves. You know, due to recent structural changes, Yaya Region 3, which I oversee, has not yet fully begun its work. But we now have our green light, and we're now looking to launch and actively develop in this area. What we want to build as well is connection within our youth and young adults within our churches. We might have a lot of youth and young adults in one church, and whilst another young person is in another church, and maybe is saying, I feel like there's only 3 or 4 of us in this church, you know, what's happening here? But when they connect with other youth and young adults, they can see that actually this vision is for the wider audience. This vision is actually, there is more people running with this vision than just me. And as we can see in Proverbs 27, verse 17, it says, iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. And that's the thing, when we are in a bigger community, we can sharpen each other. And so for any more information, you know, if you're youth pastor and Yaya coordinator on this call, please, there is a group chat that we want to just share ideas, one with this vision of church growth. Please, 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 just take, just scan the QR code, join this WhatsApp group. And if you need any more information about what Yaya is doing in the UK, our email address is here for Region 3, the Region 3 email address is here, and the contact number for myself is displayed on the screen. And I'll end it with this last thing, as I talk about prayer. You know, in 1 Kings chapter 18, when Elijah prays for rain, in verse 41, he says that, listen, I hear a mighty rainstorm coming. He tells Ahab, I hear a mighty rainstorm coming. I truly believe that this quiet revival, you know, it's not going to be quiet. It is coming as a massive revival. And so Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bowed low to the ground, and prayed with his face between his knees whilst he sent his servant to go and look towards the sea. It says that the servant 7 times went. 6 times he went and he didn't see anything. But it was the 7th time that he came back and said he saw a cloud about the size of a man's hand rising from the sea. I want us to continue, just an encouragement to continue in prayer. Continue in prayer. That it might take a while, but surely this vision of church growth will come to pass. God bless you all, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak.
Amen.